Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started again. So what we're going to do now is plenary session 2. It's the SGIP members business meeting. And I will start with the 2013 SGIP accomplishments to date this year. And then Patrick will review the 2014 business plan, so the things that we plan to do for next year. And then Patrick will do a meet the board candidates session. So the candidates that are running for the different board positions, Patrick will have them come forward and you can see them. Then what we'll do is whatever time is left between then and 6:30, we'll have a Q&A session. So any questions folks have, wait for the microphone to get to you and then have an open session. And then I want to emphasize two things with the reception tonight from 7 to 9. There's been a couple questions. Will there be food there? And absolutely there will be food there. And that's important to me too, right? If you know me at all, you know how important that is to me. So definitely there'll be food there. Second thing is there's like 20, 21, 22 mile an hour winds outside. So it's been moved from the Honda Pavilion to the Vista Room, which if you went to the reception that was last night, it's in that same room. So it's on this level. You go back, to the bar area, or you go back and around the corner, it's on the other side. So there's plans out on the registration area of this level of the hotel, and you should be easily to find it. Vista Room, 7 o'clock. Okay. So let me go through the accomplishments this year to date. And remember what I said a little earlier about a key thing for SGIP was relevance to the industry. The fact that we know what the needs of the industry are, what are the key topics, and the facts that we're addressing those, whether it's the domain expert work groups, whether it's the priority action plans, whether it's the board committees, whether it's the standing committees, the different groups that we have, the relevant things that need to be addressed are being addressed. So I'm going to cover, first of all, what does SGIP 2.0 do, okay? And second, I'm going to start with the technical committee because that is really the core, of the work that we do with respect to the relevance to the industry. Then I'll finish with the executive committee, the marketing and membership committee, nominating and governance committee, and audit committee. Key accomplishments for this year. These are the 5 what we call board level committees of SGIP. Okay. So a lot of times we say, well, what is it at a high level that SGIP 2 does? We could say, well, first is, again, relevance to the industry. So think of what are the user requirements, and with respect to that, as we look at deployments, look at development of technology, what gaps do we have with standards, right? Second is, and I think Commissioner Norris used this term and how important it was, as well as Hank Kenchington, the word accelerate, right? Accelerate standards development and harmonization. So accelerate's important. That was a key message that George Arnold received firsthand from Secretary Locke and Secretary Chu on the White House lawn about normal time to do a standard 5 years or so, right, with IEEE and IEC. And basically, you guys got to find a better way, a faster way to do it. The other key word here is harmonization. The International Activities Committee, is really at the forefront of this. Harmonization is making sure that what we do is not U.S.-centric, not North American-centric, but harmonized internationally. and for interoperability of smart grid devices and systems. Disparate standards in different countries cause what? Trade barriers, right? That's why, when was it? We did the APEC workshop, right, in Montana. Was that a year and a half ago, or maybe 2 years ago? With all the Asia-Pacific economic countries. We have 12, 13 countries there. And the object of that was harmonization of standards and interoperability across all the Asia-Pacific economic countries, right? Bring those trade barriers down. So if you develop a product in Malaysia, it's not based on standards in your country, where if you try to export it, no one outside your country is going to buy it because they don't recognize how it works or how it was developed. Third is the necessary testing and certification requirements. Very, very important. One thing to write the standard, but it's very important, right? How do we test for compliance first? But compliance does not guarantee interoperability, right? You and I could have products that comply to the same standard. I guarantee you the first time we connect them together, they won't talk to each other, okay? So it's very important for testing, certification, basically compliance, interoperability. Oversee the performance of these activities, continue the momentum. We'll talk about the program management office, both Patrick and I, and how important that is with performance and continuing the momentum. Inform and educate industry stakeholders on interoperability. Commissioner Norris referenced that with NARUC. We've talked about that both at the state and federal level. It's very important. And lastly is outreach, talked about with international, with global interoperability alignment, the work that we're doing with the European Commission, with the agreements with Korea, Japan, and Ecuador, and Colombia. Very close to an agreement with Peru, the agreement with Brazil that tomorrow we will sign, and other countries that we're talking with. Okay, so this is at a high level a good overview of the key points of what SGIP does. Okay, so I'm not gonna, these slides will be available. I think it's a very good reference for all of us in terms of what we've done so far this year. And I'm going to highlight, especially the technical committee. There's a tremendous number of accomplishments, the technical committee. So let's just look. I want to do this committee by committee. So let's do the Smart Grid Cybersecurity Committee first. The Privacy Roadmap, the User's Guide to the NIST Information Report that was done a couple years ago, the draft of that NIST 7628 report, Revision 1, and then the mapping of the NERC SIP version 5 standards to the NIST 7628, okay, the guidelines to smart grid for cybersecurity. So these are very, very key things, again, very relevant to our industry from the Cybersecurity Committee to date this year. Let's look at Testing and Certification Committee. The Interoperability Process Reference Manual, version 2, with a companion document of frequently asked questions. The Interoperability Testing and Certification Authorities Development Guide. So these are two key documents from this committee, the IPRM and the ITCA. Along with the ITCA is the frequently asked questions and a white paper on the importance and value of testing and certification for the smart grid. Okay? And lastly then, priority testing issues for utilities, a report with that subject. Okay? How about the Architecture Committee? As we mentioned, Dave Woolman really spent time on this and had some nice diagrams with working closely with the European Union's, we call it the Smart Grid Coordination Group, to coordinate smart grid architectures on methodology and interoperability. Looking at our conceptual reference model, And one of the things when we were in Brussels and when they presented their architecture model, the big difference was they have another domain for distributed generation as a separate domain that not part of our conceptual reference model. So, and Dave highlighted on the diagram the DG aspects to that. And how do we harmonize then what Europe, their model, with the model that we've developed here? So that's been an ongoing dialogue for a couple years, and launched the Transactive Energy Working Party, the Business to Grid Domain Expert Work Group. That's near completion on the Transactive Energy Retail Applications White Paper. Okay. The Smart Grid Implementation Methods Committee was set up within the last 2 years, really at the request of, big request from the EEI, Edison Electric Institute, and the investor-owned utilities with EEI. And so this, we're going to talk more about this, but a couple things, 2 major projects with strong focus on the real-world. So this is the real-world implementation of interoperability experiences with smart grid technology deployment. How can we share experiences of lessons learned in deploying the technology, but particularly lessons learned in deploying technology with certain standards incorporated? And so one project is the Interoperability Implementation Experiences, a monthly series of reports. And second is the Interoperability Mapping Tool that the committee this morning had a demonstration of the tool. And it's going to be demonstrated again tomorrow, in the session tomorrow. Is it Thursday? What time on Thursday? In the morning? What was the start time? Okay. And that's Thursday morning. Okay. The Distributed Renewables Generation and Storage Domain Expert Work Group. We had a newsletter recently that highlighted 5 key, I think I remember 5 key work items of Al Hefner's Domain Expert Work Group. The topic of distributed generation, of the new amendment to IEEE Standard 1547, which gives us more flexibility now with respect to islanding and anti-islanding of distributed generation, as well as the ability to use inverters now for voltage and reactive power support. These key areas, these are very relevant topics in the industry, and these are all being addressed by this Domain Expert Work Group. So one is coordinated with DOE and Department of Defense to define use cases based on microgrid demonstration projects and looking at architectures and models for information exchange. And the second is releasing distributed energy resources, hierarchical classification of use cases in the process for developing information exchange requirements and object models. Okay. Then the Business and Policy Domain Expert Work Group. So you've heard some talk today about transactive energy. With the fast emergence of that, this group formed an ad hoc group to explore a framework for data sharing and usage agreements between interacting parties. And then the Transmission and Distribution Domain Expert Work Group continues to develop scenarios for transmission business distribution load model, and it facilitates communications between the energy management system, or the system the utilities have in their control center for managing generation and transmission, and the DMS, or the system that manages the distribution part of the system, and develop scenario 14 to address abnormal states of transmission bus distribution load model following very large-scale events such as Superstorm Sandy. Okay? And the Vehicle to Grid Domain Expert Work Group continues to look at identify the gaps for plug-in electric vehicle fueling, and also working closely with DOE laboratories at new opportunities to optimize electric vehicle supply equipment deployment systems. Okay? And then PAP 22, Priority Action Plan 22, on electric vehicle fueling submetering requirements, compiling the core requirements for submetering as they apply to form factor, accuracy, performance, security, data formats, and certification for both mobile and stationary applications. Okay, so you can see that's a lot of that's just accomplishments this year to date. Okay, of the technical committee and associated work efforts. All right. So let's look at the executive committee. One of the things we've done at the executive committee level is conducted a search earlier this year for executive director, and we hired Patrick Gannon, and then hired Susan Hoyler as director of technical operations and Blaine Cole as director of marketing and membership. Talked about this earlier, but we established the International Activities Committee under the Executive Committee with Mark Clare as chair. And we feel as this committee gets going and gets its feet on the ground and grows, it will very well be a separate board committee at that point. But for now, it's we have it under the Executive Committee. And then third is the oversight of the Smart Grid Implementation Methods Committee with Don Von Dolen. Where's Don? There's Don. Don Von Dolen from EPRI as the chair. And very excited about both the International Activities Committee with Mark's leadership and the Smart Grid Implementation Methods Committee with Don's leadership going forward. Two very important committees, and I referenced those are two of the four short-term key things that we needed to focus on that came out of our face-to-face board meeting July 31st and August 1st was these last two bullets. Okay, marketing and membership launched the Smart Grid Implementation Methods Committee, and second was membership. So because we're a membership funded model now, membership is very important, and it's the primary source of revenue. And so the campaign, we went from 88 dues paying members at launch to a current number of about 207. Okay, and that's in the first part, up to date from the beginning of the year. And then the member collaboration workspace in place via CAVI, and then a lot of work put into getting this meeting organized here in Florida. Okay, then the Nominating Governance Committee held two successful board of director elections. So we'll have one here coming up at the end, between now and the end of the year. But what you don't realize is the bylaws and the policies, procedures that you have, you can write these conceptually, but once the organization starts operating, like in January 1st when we fully transitioned over, that's the true test for how solid your bylaws and procedures are. And it's truly an ongoing effort to make sure the foundation with which, the governance, the foundation within which you operate is sound and makes sense. And it's truly a continuous effort by David Forfia and the group that he has. So we've fine-tuned or where needed written new policies and procedures and bylaw changes for elections. Then establish the procedures necessary for our operation with respect to founding members, consensus and voting procedures, member good standing policy, and our antitrust policy. And then responded to technical priority items that came from the technical committee under John Caskey and Susan Hoyler's leadership. An example is the non-member participation agreement in technical activities. And then the audit committee, which is led by Barry Hauser, we sent out an RFP, got a number of proposals back, and we selected MFA as our audit service provider, completed the charter for the committee, the audit committee, and then also this group created interim procurement guidelines. And so that is a really quick overview here of the accomplishments to date. So that's this year. And now what we'll do is turn it over to Patrick, and Patrick will take us through the business plan and the plans for 2014. Patrick?
Thank you, John. And as you can see, a great deal has been accomplished this year already. As we move forward and consider what the business plan for 2014 will be, one of the things I wanted to do was to, as I was listening to the presentation earlier, especially listening to folks who were around at the beginning there with Hank and then Ketchington and John Norris, and talked about some of the foundational decisions that were being made 4 years ago, and it's incredible for folks that were involved in to be able to reflect back and see the progress that was made. So as I was looking at putting together the plan going forward, I also wanted to consider what the foundational documents are, what led us to this point here, just getting through this year and planning to go forward. And one of the things that amazed me was especially the work that was done in the second half of last year in 2012. And a lot of it was put into what was called the Business Sustainment Plan. And that was one of the documents I went back and reviewed and realized that that really laid the groundwork for this fantastic and very rapid startup. And that has been really an amazing part of driving this going forward. And so before I could even discuss and think about the future business plan, we really owe a real debt of gratitude to those who were involved in building that business sustainment plan. And if I could, Scott Unger, if you could stand up, and those others who were involved in the BSP working group, let's give them a round of applause, and thank you. So Scott not only was the one developing the plan, but through many dialogues helped inculcate some of the basic guidelines of that plan, and also he served as treasurer for the first half this year, and really got our financial footing underway, and was chairing our executive committee and co-chairing our marketing committee, and so great thanks to Scott, to all the leadership there, and for laying out this roadmap for the future of smart grid interoperability, which is what that plan was all about. So just a quick overview for this discussion this afternoon. I will kind of give you a feeling for how we're organizing SGIP 2.0 in preparation for the new work and extending going forward. Talk about the strategic goals and objectives and how those came about and how they're kind of guiding our thoughts for the future here. I'll get into a brief part of the details and kind of give you an idea of where that process is going forward, and discuss some of the strategic services, so how we're actually beginning to think about executing against the strategic goals and objectives. So thinking about SGIP 2.0, we really are in a very unique position. SGIP rests on the foundation of inclusiveness of all smart grid stakeholders, where we provide a fair and a very safe place for dialogue. And it's really interesting, especially yesterday and today with the member groups meeting, to see that come alive, to see people debating. And that is unique about SGIP. Like many of you, I've been involved in other standards organizations and other industry associations. I have never encountered the breadth of participation that occurs at SGIP. This is unique, to have the government, the regulators, the manufacturers, the utilities, and now even financial services, people involved in what we're doing here. This is unique. And this really, by being a member, provides the privileged access to this collected knowledge from all these domains. And that is of significant value, especially when you realize that not only the collected knowledge that gets stored in the documents and the discussions that are in the minutes of meetings and so forth, but the collaboration that goes on of interacting, of meeting people. And that's of extreme value, and we're so glad that you are here this week so that you can experience that firsthand and can carry that forward and be part of sharing that dialogue. One of the other foundational documents I looked at in preparing the business plan was to look at what was actually prepared just over a year ago. Obviously, the very first document was the Articles of Incorporation. And as I've been just talking with members, I find a lot of very forward thinkers that is articulating where we should go. I've run across some people say, no, the mission of SGIP was defined in 2009, and that should never be changed. Well, actually, if you go back and you read our Articles of Incorporation, it made it very clear that we are to carry forward the work of the previous SGIP and support NIST in fulfilling their obligations under the Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007, including a number of things, but not limited to those. So yes, providing the technical guidance, coordination around standards harmonization, absolutely. Specifying testing and certification requirements, sure. We've got the standard member committee really driving that work there. Informing and educating stakeholders, absolutely. We carry forward with our e-meetings, webinars, and conferences like this. Liaisoning with international organizations. You'll see that firsthand tomorrow with our international panel we have before us. And undertaking other activities. Even our bylaws state that we should engage in future refinement and evolution that supports the nature of the smart grid business and make sure that we support the needs of not only the smart grid ecosystem, but of our membership in whichever ways that helps to drive interoperability. So not only is the SGIP 2.0 not a static organization, our mission is not static. Our mission is to continue to evolve and meet those needs. And so in putting together our plan for how we do that, we thought about, well, how best to articulate what SGIP is all about. Because power grid modernization can be thought of as a symphony involving utilities, manufacturers, regulators, and other stakeholders. And SGIP is the conductor of this symphony. SGIP helps to orchestrate the interoperability requirements gathering, development of the harmonized standards, and through the catalog of standards, the evaluation of those standards there, and then to facilitate implementation. Because without SGIP, the integration of interoperable solutions for the multi-trillion-dollar smart grid industry would be slower. It would be less effective, and it would be more costly. And so SGIP's mission is to provide the framework so that we can orchestrate all the stakeholders together to accelerate that standards harmonization and driving interoperability. We were established to identify the requirements for harmonization of the standards and also to help our members realize the benefits of the standards efforts. And so, as a member of SGIP, our members can stay more competitive, more informed, and well-connected. So, from those thought processes about what SGIP is all about and how best to articulate our mission going forward, earlier this year we engaged in a series of surveys and member engagement interviews. And many of you here might have already been contacted. And so that input you gave us was summarized together. And we thought about it, and from that, tried to articulate in a fairly simple way what it was that members were telling us that they wanted to see happen and what the real value was. And what we came up with here is that the values, very simply stated, is to our members, is that we help to accelerate, we facilitate, we navigate, and we communicate. And so those values that were articulated to us by our members then became the foundation for setting the strategic goals and objectives going forward. And so we prepared a very detailed strategic goals and objectives document, and that's put into our business plan, and that will be available for you all to read as you go through that when it's completed there. But essentially, we want to accelerate the realization of the benefits there and to continue to facilitate the core work. And so it's not only providing the collaborative workspace and the project management process, the catalog of standards process, but refining those. So as you have new ideas and new ways that we can facilitate those processes, we want to hear about it and continue to get your feedback. And navigating through this hundreds of standards that are being evaluated and looked at and that affect operations out here. And I'll talk to you in a minute about some of the tools we'll be doing there. And communicating with all the stakeholders in the ecosystem about the standards activities, the benefits of those activities, but also the impact going forward. And there's some services that we're evaluating right now as to how we can best deliver on those goals. And so with the board-approved set of strategic objectives and some goals and some objectives, we thought about how do we formulate our business plan so that we can, in fact, achieve the values the members desire to have the acceleration, the facilitation, the navigation, and the communications. And the key thing was we provide those by keeping in mind that it all starts and ends with our members. So in my view of the organization, it is the member working groups that drive the value and the benefit going forward. Because it is your funding, your efforts, and your feedback that will make not only SGIP successful, but make you and your business and your operations successful. So you get more out of it the more you're involved, and the more of your colleagues that could be involved. Because I think as you begin to see not only the expansive work that John was describing that's already being accomplished this year, but some of the newer areas that we're exploring, there's opportunities for other people in your organizations in different functional areas to get involved and to derive value and benefits going forward. And so with the focus on the member operations, yes, we have the organizational construct around it with our board of directors and board committees, et cetera, but they're there to drive the benefits to the members and to produce products that are valuable to the members and also to the broader stakeholder community outside the membership. But we want to make sure that we continue to deliver value to our members. And within that organization, we have our staff and service providers. So I've kind of highlighted here a org chart to give you a brief idea. Just a kind of a legend to that is that the items with a black border around it are pretty much what's in place today. The ones with the green outside border are still to be filled and going forward. The green are the staff and the yellow are the outsourced service providers. So you can see we've pretty well move forward in implementation of what was in the business sustainment plan of having a very small core staff and then coordinating work through a whole series of outside service providers. And we think that model can be sustained going forward. There are some adjustments we want to do in our new plan as to, we realize there's a lot more internal coordination with support staff needed, and so we'll consider how to best deliver that going forward here. But also we want to begin to execute on how do we reach out and through grant solicitations and endowments begin to identify those sources of revenue to help fund this expansive opportunities we have before us. So with these in place, our key focus is on the technical operations and be sure that we can continue to drive those capabilities going forward. So the architecture committee is not only moving forward with all of their coordination that they're doing, like with the European Smart Grid Coordinating Council, but also will be launching and continue to expand this Transactive Energy Working Party. So here's a core group that's looking at what are some of the architectural impacts of transactive energy. And you'll hear in presentations from the GridRise Architectural Council a great more details about not only the architectural impacts, but business and policy impacts going forward. Our cybersecurity committee is not only continuing to do the evaluations of standards in the catalog of standards process, but looking at how they can provide more information, such as a case study and training class that deals with risk management in cybersecurity environments. And working with the other organizations, government organizations, to publish the Smart Grid Cloud Computing White Paper. So how is the impact of what's happening in the cloud computing environment needing to impact and have effects on the smart grid applications, and especially from a cybersecurity standpoint. And also collaborating with our partners in government to develop the Supply Chain Awareness Guide, which will be directed at the electric utility executives, helping to explain the risks that cybersecurity can have on their supply chain and what the procurement concepts are impacted through the high-level supply chain there. Continuing on with our organizations, also because successful deployment of interoperable technology is the ultimate benefit and value to SGIP, implementation is integral to our acceleration aspects of our mission. And so the Implementation Methods Committee is developing the interoperability experience case studies to address smart grid functionality. They'll be looking at a whole series of functional areas within utilities that will need to be written up. In fact, just earlier today, the Smart Grid Implementation Methods Committee met and had some presentations on how that's progressing, identifying some of the key attributes that they want to focus on in 2014, but really wanted to get started already, and so we've got an initiative underway to at least get the first one going this year. So we're kind of advancing that work, and there's some great opportunities. If in utility operation you're not the one involved in that area, find out who in your organization would benefit from participating and learning from the experiences of others who are forward-thinking and doing implementations there. Also, the implementation methods is looking at how to use this smart grid interoperable mapping tool and customize it to focus in on adding to this whole database of standards, the information that comes out of our catalog of standards process that identifies the research work that goes into the evaluations for those activities. And that's a key aspect that is being driven through the IMC there. Also, because testing and certification is very valuable to our members, the Testing and Certification Committee is looking at building a directory of industry test programs and kind of using the concept that's been shown here with our catalog of standards process of doing something similar in terms of identifying the types of testing activities that could benefit from their kind of focus area. And also looking in the areas that are important for the Electromagnetic Interoperability and Interference Working Group is doing some white paper works on application and best practices guide that how the EMC test standards can impact systems and devices. Our Home to Grid Duke has got some ongoing projects and doing a number of things that are focusing on communications between utilities and home devices, which as I'm sure all of you, even in your own homes, begin to see, that's a huge changing environment with new technologies and new bandwidth constraints hitting in your home environment. And so how these new smart home appliances begin to interact with the home networks, and what are issues related to data privacy, and how the internet protocols can interface into the home environment, interfaces into energy management type systems. And so there's a huge activity and an opportunity for a great deal more members to participate in that work going forward. We have the work of our building to grid and our industry to grid that is actually doing some joint work, and they're doing some white papers on electrical storage, thermal storage, and again, they're too looking at the transactive energy retail applications. And so another aspect of our work is trying to examine what the impact is coming with transactive energy. And these groups are developing new white papers on the energy ecologies related to microgrids. There's a lot of talk about how the impacts when you have standalone microgrids and how they tie back into the grid, the larger operations and not. And so there's a number of issues that are being addressed through these groups here. And they're in the process right now of evaluating then what sort of issues are coming out of the workshop this week, just from what's being presented, as I mentioned, on the Gridwise Architectural Council on this whole transactive energy. And we want to use that session this week to get a lot of feedback, and from that help inform what sort of work should we be doing in addition to the Duke. So if there's a specific set of activities that need to be identified, then we have our priority action plan process to move that forward. And so there will be some dialogues just this week to identify the formation of a possible new PAP dealing with issues that come out of that work. One of the other areas that's getting a lot of attention right now is the re-ramp up of the weather information priority action plan. So this group will be looking forward to identifying the use cases dealing with the bidirectional weather data exchange and examining the different standards development organizations that are dealing with weather standards. So it's not only in the U.S. with NOAA, National Weather Service, but also the World Meteorological Organization, and those kinds of standards that have been developed that could be applied both in modeling and in information exchange. And so seeking to identify what needs to be done to bring all those together. And then trying to coordinate all those is the work of our Director of Technical Operations, who is running the Program Management Office, a core small group that provides feedback on those processes that we need to have, and the queue and the catalog of standards, and then through the technical committee, coordinating the work there and keeping them informed in the issues that need to be addressed. And so it's through that process that Susan is able to capture the needs of the different working groups and feed those back through this support groups of the PMO and the TC. And looking at that, and going forward, the current estimate right now is that of the close to 100 different standards that are right now being looked at in the queue, that they probably expect somewhere between 30 to 50 standards will be up for balloting in this next year. So there will be a lot of work going through the process and a lot of opportunities for members to stay abreast of all of these new entries and to have a voice and feedback and balloting on that work going forward. And so with all of those kind of operational pieces, we're also making sure that we have the right activities in place to maintain the relationships with the other strategic sectors out there. And those of you who were here last night and maybe came to the reception, it was one that was brought to us by Dixon Wright from Wells Fargo Insurance, where there's new opportunities, and this is one of the activities that comes about when we maintain relationships, and there's some new relationships that will be established with contractors that do smart grid implementations and financial service organizations and the kinds of standards they use that are implemented in some cases by utilities and what the impact is for those. So that's just another example of the kinds of work that we're not only managing the existing process, but continue to expand. And so this is the new opportunities that our members will also have an opportunity to participate in. And as was mentioned earlier, the International Activities Committee continuing to do outreach and establish global interoperability alignment. We'll highlight the work of those organizations in the international panel tomorrow morning. Backing all this up is how we communicate with our members. There's a great deal of activities going on, and I tried to kind of shorten it down there, that really some of the major things that we'll be doing next year in terms of not only continuing the kind of communications and public relations that we've been ramping up through the last half of this year, but reaching out and putting together seminars and other educational activities. And certainly the regulator committee is key for that, as we heard this afternoon from John Norris with FERC, and we'll be hearing Friday from Lisa Edgar on the Florida regulators, and tying in with NARUC. And so those are some key opportunities that are at the top of our list as part of the outreach that we'll be doing. Also, be sure that we have a Speakers Bureau, an opportunity to identify conferences and speaking opportunities. So we ask our members to let us know if there's events that you're attending, we can highlight, we can help promote. If you need slide decks from SGIP, we can provide those to you. And then we want to, promote the work of our members. We just, in our last e-meeting webinar, did a highlight focus on the work of our research organizations. So it was kind of a Category 14 research academic organizations that Steve Wittegren led, and provided some really key insights to why these researchers and academics are involved in SGIP, and the kind of information transformation that's occurring through those processes, and the value to members to interact with some of the smartest and brightest people that are out there doing research in those key areas. And so not only that, but providing our members enhanced visibility. One of the key things that happens now when we issue a press release, our public relations firm, Edelman, is out there contacting media, and we're seeing 2, 3, 4 media requests for follow-up interviews with each of our press releases. This is an outstanding opportunity for people to talk about either their particular working group or activities that they're implementing within their own interaction between, say, a manufacturer and a utility. So those opportunities to promote SGIP, but also what the members are doing and how your particular activities are a highlighted portion of that, we now have that whole function in place to do that. Going forward in 2014, now that we have the infrastructure in place to really handle multiple meetings, and we realized in 2013 that we were doing well to put together our very first inaugural thing. But going forward, we want to make sure that we provide opportunities for just the members-only meetings. So just as members were able to have the opportunity yesterday and half of today, it was really very compressed. And I heard from a lot of people, there was, hey, I wanted to attend 2 or 3, and they were overlapping. So we need a couple more days of just member meetings to facilitate that kind of interaction, because we think that's very important. So our staff is working on what that plan will be, what the locations will be for that. We want to distribute those around, so we'll have East Coast, West Coast, and Central Region opportunities. And so we'll have at least 2 member-only, just member meetings, and then a combination members and conference in the second half of this next year. So to make all this happen, it does take resources and financial resources, and so we're very thankful for the financial support that we receive from our members and the financial support that we receive from NIST through the cooperative agreement. And so this next year, as we are able to take advantage of the full annual funding from the cooperative agreement. That increases the total revenue available to us, because this year the cooperative agreement only funded us for 9 months of the year. So we have that. We're projecting increase in membership, and very active renewal process underway. Some of you may have already begun receiving your renewal notices, and if you have any questions, please see me after the presentation. Let's talk about that. I'm actually expecting close to 100% renewal, but some people, corporations may be merging or something like that. So we have some very aggressive campaigns going forward on that, and expect to see increases in those growth of the organization going forward. It is our goal to continue to work with NIST, fulfill the requirements and the needs they have, and continue that funding into 2014 and 2015. And also explore the grant funding operations through this in 2014 into 2015 and in future years there, and looking at other potential endowments going forward. And then identifying with the new service opportunities what sort of revenue that will begin to provide for us. With that funding, we've been able to look at how we can increase our expense funding. And so obviously with the added cooperative agreement funding, we can add more expense funding, so we'll be able to do a great deal more work there. The bulk of that going into funding the technical programs and the committee support operations going forward. As we then look at our out years, we've set a guidelines that while we are a non-profit organization, we do need to operate with a safety margin, and so we have set a goal of a net income margin around 5–6%, so that we begin to build up a reserve funds for that, and continue to be able to support the technical activities there. And with that, begin the strategic efforts to lay the groundwork for how we can then create and develop and deliver these new information services in the future. And so for those of you who like to look at numbers, we've actually got some very, very detailed numbers, and suffice it, our treasurer and our executive committee have been poring over those numbers. We'll be presenting those to our board of directors for a preliminary review on the board meeting on Thursday, with the ultimate goal that the business plan and the budget gets formally approved at the board meeting on December 6th. So we're using this meeting here this week to present the elements of our business plan, and then to engage with our members and get feedback, let the board members provide feedback to that, and then use that to finalize our plan in the next month. And so I mentioned earlier that we have some goals here for creating some new strategic services, and I'd like to just briefly outline for you what some of those begin to look at. I mentioned under the Implementation Methods Committee their work on interoperability implementation experiences, and that's a key activity that they're already beginning to do, and we're looking at how that will expand into the future, and how best to document that and have members involved in writing up those going forward, and identifying how the standards are actually being implemented within the various smart grid activities out there. In addition, I mentioned the interoperability mapping tool, so we're going to look at how to best customize that. And the Implementation Methods Committee is going to be forming a subcommittee to look at that. So we want to get the feedback from the members that says, okay, here's a tool as it exists today. What else do we need? What are the best things that we can do to really make it valuable and actually make it more timely? Because sometimes it was mentioned that the standards process and tracking standards is like watching molasses, and they're very static kinds of steps in those processes. Well, there's a lot going on, especially within SGIP, and if we can capture some of that activity and provide more timely information, so that when a business needs to take a snapshot and say, where are we, and what's been happening recently, and what's happening in the next few months or next year, we'll have the tools that allow you to kind of go into that. And then using that data, how do we then create a set of information services around that? And part of that begins with a set of analysis services, we're calling it here, to apply a methodology to assess the business impact from standards implementations, to help calculate some of the cost benefits of the interoperability experiences. So we can take a variety of input from individual organizations anonymize it, and then publish some information back that can be very helpful. So when new initiatives get started up, we have a process in place that can very quickly begin to take some of those early experiences and provide some of the return on investment and cost-benefit results that can really be helpful for other organizations as they're planning out their deployments. And then from that, based on those results from the implementation experiences, from the interoperability mapping tool, how can then we provide the kinds of services that allow organizations to identify what's the real ongoing impact? And as we got thinking about this, and I was talking with one of our members, he said, well, you know, from a engineering point of view, if you're trying to, you know, measure direction and magnitude, well, that's a vector. So I said, oh, so what you're saying is you need to know what the vector of influence is of the standards. What's driving the standards? Where are they in the process? What direction are they going? What's the timing of that? What's the business impact of that? And so you can begin to imagine the kinds of business impact services we can put together around this concept of defining the vector of influence. So that's just a quick snapshot of what's going on in the future planning. And we're going to provide an opportunity here in a few minutes to get some Q&A on this, and then we'll have opportunities at the reception this evening to go into a little more detail on that. And so before I get into the question and answer, it would be my pleasure. I would like to take a moment here to introduce to you some of the candidates that we have for our Board of Directors election. So the board has just reviewed the slate of candidates that are up for the next term beginning in January of 2014. And that slate will be we'll go through and come up with the formal announcement through the Board of Directors meeting on Thursday, and then from that our plan is to open up the balloting following next week on the, I think or this weekend or Monday next week. So we'll be doing official balloting. So what I'd like to do is to recognize those individuals who have been nominated as candidates for the elections that will go on here in the month of November. And if I could, just so that people will kind of see who you are, if you could kind of come up here to the front as I call your name, come on up, and at least that way people can better identify who you are, and then as a future representative to our board, have an opportunity to dialogue with you during our reception here. So I don't think all of the candidates are here, but I will call their names. So from Category 3, Consumers, Residential, Commercial, Industrial, we have as a candidate Richard Kornfeld from the Grid to Home Inc. Is Richard here? Nope. From renominated from existing, from Category 5, Electric Utilities, Investor-Owned Utilities, is Doug McGinnis from Exelon. Doug, if you come on up. And from Category 7, Electric Utilities, Rural Electric Associations, Tony Thomas from NRECA. Also from Category 11, Information Technology, is Mark Clare from Qualcomm. From Category 13, Professional Societies, Trade Associations, is Barry Hauser from Lakeview Group. Barry's one of our carry-forward existing directors. From Category 15, Relevant Federal Government Agencies, I'm pleased to announce that we have a candidate for a voting member of the board, Chris Greer from NIST. Chris, come on up. Also renominated Category 17, Retail Service Providers, Mark Smith from Reliant Energy. Mark's here. And state and local regulators, nominated from a representative from NARUC is Nick Wagner, and I was informed that Nick's flying in, so he's arriving later tonight, but he'll be here at the conference next couple days. And then from Category 21, continuing from transmission operators, independent system operators, is David Forfia. Thank you, David. And this year we have two at-large positions to be filled, and we have two candidates for that. Ed Eckert from Itron, is Ed here, and Eric Gunther from Internex. Eric, come on up. So this is your slate of candidates, and as participating, those organizations who are participating members will have the opportunity to vote. And we we do need you to vote because our bylaws require us to get a quorum of members to vote in each category. So even though none of these candidates are running opposed, we do need affirmations that you think that, yes, they're viable people, they could serve you well, and they should serve on the board. So you need to at least vote to do that. And so if you would join me in welcoming these candidates. And thank you, guys. Thank you. So we have some time here before we adjourn and go to our reception. Actually, the reception's not till 7, but so we have some time here for question and answers or comments. Somebody got? Okay. 6:30 for the reception. So not 6:05. So you got 25 minutes, okay? So John and I are here to answer any questions. We threw a lot out there, and you know, we'd like to get any comments, questions. So Pam's coming around. There's someone here for the question.
Ron Cunningham, AEP. Just real quick, are those slides being posted currently to the CAVI?
Yes, yes. So we will post these on CAVI, and then all of the slides from the conference will be put online. But we can, yeah, put these up on the CAVI so they're available for all members. So that's a good question. Others? Okay. Any last comments, John? All right, then we will go ahead then and adjourn the members' meeting, and thank you for your attendance here. Please continue to use the opportunity and collaborate. Thank you.